Great. Thank you for confirming that. We'd like to welcome you, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to members of the board, staff from UETN, other visitors and guests. We appreciate you joining us this morning. I hope that you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. And as we're moving towards the holidays, the end of December, I hope that you're all planning on taking a break and enjoying time with family and friends and just enjoying this wonderful time of year. I appreciate that it's a busy time also, so thank you again for taking the time to join this morning. We have a number of things to discuss as a board, but first we are going to start with a guest and a presentation. We have joining us this morning, Lais Martinez, who is joining us, and she will be presenting with the state's One Utah Thriving program, and appreciate her joining us. We welcome her to this board meeting. And unless there are any questions from members of the board, I'll turn the time over to her for her presentation.
Thank you so much. I am honored and humbled to be with you all today. This morning, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So I have the lovely opportunity to, and is that, oh, I noticed that the captions are on. Is that working for everyone? I love the accessibility of that. Thank you so much. So I have the lovely opportunity to get to sit on a One Utah Council. It's a group of state agencies that come together and led by our fearless leader, Nubia Pena, who is the Senior Equity and Opportunity Advisor for Governor Cox's administration. And so through that, I get to work with Jen Gibbs, who extended an invitation for this presentation this morning on the work that the Utah system of higher education is doing to advance opportunities on behalf of students across the state of Utah and close disparities. And so I'll start by saying, why do we do this work, right? The board really, the Utah Board of Higher Education has been charged by our legislature to focus on the following 5 system priorities: quality, affordability, educational opportunity, access, equity, and completion, workforce alignment, and preparation for high quality jobs and economic growth. So we know that this is important to the state. We know that there are many different imperatives for why a higher education access to higher education is so important. You can look at it through the social moral imperative, but you can also look at it through a workforce and economic imperative. Ensuring that students are equitably educated across the state is the only way that we can build strong families, strong communities, and a stronger Utah. So as was mentioned, our work really aligns with Governor Cox's administration's vision around One Utah Thriving. And most recently, they published this work, and there are 5 pillars that they're really focusing on to address disparities, eliminate barriers, increase upward mobility pathways, and promote stability for more people and families across our state. And you'll notice that these 5 pillars are really threaded within the ways in which the Utah system of higher education is also addressing this work. So in 2020, Some of you may be familiar with this work. We created a framework and it was adopted by the Utah Board of Higher Education for closing disparities. And so the way that we do this is by considering several questions. And the reason why we do this is because we want to embed this work in everything that we do and really operationalize equity as a new way of doing business. And so the first piece of that is assess. Asking new questions will change how your organization operates. And so the questions that we're asking at the Utah System of Higher Education is, what are the intended impacts and outcomes of policies and practices that we have in place? And what is the impact of eliminating opportunity, attainment, equity, access gaps? We're always asking ourselves who benefits from our practices and who unintentionally is excluded. We're also asking, how does the policy, initiative, resource allocation, or strategy advance opportunities for those who have historically been inequitably served by our resources? We're also asking, what are the barriers to more equitable outcomes? And we're assessing, where are our strengths? Where can we lean on existing levers in our state? Really making sure that we're not duplicating efforts and that we're not doing this work in isolation, that there's collaboration and coordination and a landscape understanding of what policies, practices exist and how we can lever those to move this work forward. Additionally, we're asking the question, do our policies and practices promote optimal working and learning environments for staff that consider safety and belonging? So this is really important when we're looking at educational equity, because so often the conversation focuses on students. And while that's important, we want to make sure that students are enrolling, retaining, and completing, and then moving into workforce opportunities. But at the same time, we recognize that if the working environments for staff, faculty, administrators are not conducive, that creates burnout. And so we really want to think through, how do we create to scale supports for staff and faculty. The next piece of that is examine data. And Nubia always talks about this. We've had multiple conversations, she and I, around the difference between being data-driven and data-informed. So we really try and focus on being data-informed and people inspired and student driven. So that feels different than what historically has been done in higher ed, where the focus is on the quantitative data and that drives all the conversations. We're really trying to reframe that conversation and humanize that conversation. So our strategies and decisions are measured and data informed. We ask questions like, what does the current data tell us about disparities among student, staff, and faculty groups? Where do current data collection methodologies fail to measure the extent of underrepresentation? And we're also asking data governance infrastructure questions and whether or not they support forward-thinking measures. We're asking, what data sources will you use to understand the impacts of intersecting identities? We recognize that traditional federal IPEDS reporting has limitations to it. And so we're working with our institutions to provide additional sophisticated measures for understanding our students in a more full and authentic way. I see a question, Patty, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. The three things that you just said, that being data informed, and then it was just beautiful. The other two, that was just beautiful, and I took a moment to reflect how beautiful it was, because it wasn't just like data informed. And then I couldn't remember what the three were, and I wanted to write those down in my notes because I felt it was so powerful the way it addressed the three different areas instead of just saying evidence based or data informed. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so what we have coined is people inspired, equity driven, data informed. And that really feels different than what historically has been done. Thank you so much. And feel free, I'm going to have time at the end where we can really talk about how this work can be relevant to the work that you all are leading out on. So I'm really looking forward to that portion of the presentation, but feel free to jump in at any point, any insights that you have, questions that you might have. So I think another piece of this is, how are we informed? And this really leads into the next segment, which we call Engage and Plan. Governor Cox, through the One Utah Thriving, calls it proximity. And so the question that I ask here is, who's at your table? To create new solutions, new perspectives need to be included, right? So up front, we're asking, what is our commitment to and understanding of opportunity access gaps specific to the policy initiative, resource allocation, or strategy that we are putting in place? Another question is, what resources are you allocating for training that includes stakeholder education? So how are we involving those that we aim to better serve in the training portion of our work? How are we, and stakeholders, from a higher ed lens, state lens, this could be institutional, community, legislative partners. This could also be students, parents, families who help inform our work and drive our work forward. That proximity piece, I can't stress it enough. When we look around our table, is our table representative with multiple backgrounds, lenses, views, ways of seeing the world? So the next question, how have your various stakeholder groups, specifically those who may be affected by any potential course of action, been purposefully involved in co-creating solutions? So this means that they are involved up front rather at the back end. And we are seeing them as co-creators. We see them as experts in knowing how to remove barriers. We're seeing them as experts in their lived experiences and allowing them to inform our solutions. The last one is, how will you modify or enhance your strategies to ensure the needs of the community and each learner's individual higher education and career goals are met? This takes time, this takes consistency, this takes building relationships of trust. And this also takes making sure that we're doing follow-up, that we're closing the loop. So when we ask our stakeholders to come to the table, that we ensure that we are transparent with our communication and sharing, okay, this is how you help to inform our practices, and this is what has come out of it. Closing the loop on the conversations is critical to this, building trust and relationships. So lastly, we implement, and we're always measuring success. So is it working? And this kind of goes back to the examine data for me, where quantitative data will tell us where the gaps are. Qualitative data will tell us how and why they persist. And so having both of those and making sure that they are in place as we're measuring success is also equally important. So the questions here that we're asking and the questions that you all can ask is, what is your decision after looking at this course of action through the lens of opportunity/access gaps? Has your approach or decision changed after looking at this topic through the lens of opportunity or access? And what action will be taken, if any? How will you identify and measure the success of a potential policy, initiative, programming, resource allocation, strategy? And does that success measure properly evaluate the success relative to those you aim to close disparities for? So this means, how do they define success? And are we defining success for them? It's really important as well. I'll just share briefly. Actually, I'll pause there and just get a pulse check. Do you see opportunities for this way of operationalizing, closing disparities, and using this framework in the work that you all do, and how? How do you plan on applying this work to the work that you do?
Looks like Patty, is your hand raised still?
Yes, just because I could just talk about this all day, and I just so appreciate this presentation. I especially appreciate the words that are being used. They are so thoughtful and purposeful, and I've just been taking notes, just voraciously taking notes about how you're wording things, because it's so welcoming. It's also pointed, and it's action and result driven. And I think that's the thing taking away from this, even when you're speaking about the difference between qualitative and quantitative. Many folks just say, here's quantitative, it's easy, and this is what it is. But the real work then starts when that qualitative piece moves in. And so the way you're wording it so that it is welcoming, it is inclusive, it creates a sense of urgency, while also creates that sense of inclusion for everyone to be able to have a starting place to do this work.
Thank you, Patty. I am so appreciative of that, because we published this framework in 2020, and we were committed to having it be a fluid living document when we adopted it, and it has gone through several revisions. And we really want to make sure that it is relevant, and that it is applicable and inclusive to every student, that we're committed to doing this work, not through a zero-sum game, not through this idea that we are somehow suggesting that we will take from those who have historically had to give to those who have not. That is not the focus with this framework. The focus really is, we recognize that there are disparities in our state, and we recognize that there are several different markers for those disparities. We recognize that there are disparities for students facing economic barriers, students of color. We also recognize that there are disparities for those with different accessibilities, and different communities across our state, rural communities, urban communities. And so we really want to challenge ourselves when we're engaging in this work. If historically, I'll just say it because this is just the way that I operate, right? If there have been words that historically have been triggering and somehow made folks feel like they're not a part of this educational equity effort, then there's work that we can do to address that, reframe, because again, at the end of the day, our commitment is to closing disparities wherever they may be. And so, yes, we have been very intentional about the language that we're using. Any other thoughts from this group?
I'm just going to jump in. I too, sorry, I've been taking notes also. So it's hard to comment and write at the same time. I love the way that this can be operationalized. And it's not theoretical, it's practical, it's pragmatic, it's this can be done. Yes, there's a bit of a philosophy here that's inherent in these types of discussions, and that's certainly important, but it also has to be very practical. And I see that in the work that you are doing and what's being presented here this morning, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move on to providing some examples of the ways in which the impact that operationalizing this framework has had at the Utah system of higher education. So the first impact is that it really helped to guide our strategic plan. And I look at Spencer, who was a great part of that process. And if you have any thoughts, feel free to chime in. But, you know, being very intentional at a system level, we have to consider what are our levers of influence. And so we came up with, it's really around data governance, advocacy at a state level, and then it's also around shared understanding, building common language around efforts. That's what we're uniquely positioned to do. And so with our vision and mission here, it's clear the system is committed to providing every Utahn in every place and every circumstance an affordable certificate or degree at a USHE institution that will meaningfully improve their lives through economic opportunity, civic engagement, and personal fulfillment. That is our driving North Star. It's clear. Our institutions know where we're headed, and the focus really is on addressing and increasing enrollment, retention, completion, and opportunities that lead to upward mobility. So beyond providing, you know, that shared understanding and common language, it's really important that we, you know, put our money, you know, where our mouth is. And so, and I'll say Spencer was a huge part in this, but increasing need-based student aid. Historically, Utah has been a very merit-based that has been the drive of most of the state aid in our state. And over the last, you know, I would say 5-6 years, with this as a guiding principle, we've been able to, in fiscal year 2022, USHE, with legislative support, awarded $4.1 million in need-based aid. This last year, that was nearly doubled. So the focus on really meeting students where they are, recognizing the unique challenges that they face given coming out of a pandemic, and also rising housing costs and inflation, really trying to meet students and families where they are so that financial barriers are not the reason why students do not attend higher education in the state of Utah. I think another piece of that is the technical colleges, right? Being able to provide that as a resource and as a stackability opportunity for students, helping them to understand that they don't have to, not everyone has to do a 4-year degree. And that's not where everyone needs to start, you know, if that's not their desire. But letting students know that they have opportunities with 1, 2, 4 or more, I think has been also really important. And this has really been driven through our Utah College Advising Corps. I have to say, I remember being in Latinos in Action classrooms back in 2015 and asking students, do you plan on attending college? And hearing, it was heartbreaking to hear, no, I don't think I'll get in. I don't know if I'll be accepted. And saying no, actually, in the state of Utah, at the time we hadn't merged with the technical colleges yet, but at the time I was saying 7 out of 8 of the colleges in the state of Utah are open enrollment, meaning if you apply, you will get in. And so something as simple as and basic as that is a game changer for students. So really, through the Utah College Advising Corps, putting near peer mentors to help with the navigational support is really critical to this work. I will say it's not a silver bullet, but it is something that can support students being able to access higher education and know what opportunities exist for them. So lastly, I'll just end. Advancing educational equity won't happen overnight. It's a commitment. It's a consistent commitment to collaboration between government, business, workforce, and industry, with communities and people leading the way. Systems change work requires removing silos and duplication of efforts. The goal of educational access requires many hands, hearts, and voices united on the cause of creating opportunity through education. And really, that is the driving force here. I'm going to stop sharing so we can have a little bit of discussion. I'd love to hear from you all on any takeaways, insights that you may have. Jared, I see your hand up. It's so good to see you.
Hi, ladies. It's good to see you. I love your work, and I love that you're just down the hall, and I get to be a little part of it. So one of the thoughts that I'm having as we have this conversation here, we're looking largely through a higher education lens, right? And helping people get access to education. With the UETN organization, we have an opportunity to maybe expand that reach much farther through our public education activities and through telehealth as well. So I'm wondering if you have some thoughts or comments on how UETN can engage in that work, not only as an organization within UETN, but with stakeholders that they have the opportunity to bring into education and eliminating barriers.
Jared, that's a great question. I'm hoping that I can open that up to this board of experts and hear, what the thoughts are on how this can be relevant to the work that you all are leading.
I was hoping you would say that, because I think, it's the group that is going to handle this.
I don't want to certainly take away from what board members could say, but I could offer a couple of anecdotes in the way UETN operates that maybe offers some insights. One example that comes to mind real quickly, we have Dave Long, who's a board member. He's also the superintendent of Beaver School District. In his area, home internet is a persistent challenge, even post-COVID. And just in the last couple of months, he's sort of cobbled together resources from a nonprofit and a few other groups to find the resources to get internet to homes that don't have typical internet access, primarily for school purposes. What's been striking to me as sort of a newcomer to UETN is our focus, whether it's on the connectivity side or on the professional development side with educators. We tend to gravitate to the edges because a more well-resourced district, for an example, in K-12, may not be seeking what we could offer them, and so we tend to move to those edges. And so I feel like we do interact in those areas where there's greater need. Yesterday I was sitting next to a charter school director down in Carbon County, one of the oldest charters in the state, Pinnacle Charter School. Patty, you probably are familiar with them, but it was interesting to get his 20+ year perspective on educational equity from a charter in a rural part of the state. And not only from that geographic standpoint, but from a demographic standpoint in a part of the state that has a lot of demographic change that's occurred. And there are a lot of persistent gaps that exist. And I think from UETN's perspective, where we're kind of in the business of connectivity and innovation, we have a lot of those opportunities to pursue. And we're a willing partner in it. And so to Jared's question, I think there's more we can pursue in support of what these two major enterprises on K-12 and higher education have at their doorstep, if you will. So we're there at the ready, I guess. But I'll stop there.
I love that. Thank you, Spencer. Any others? I'm going to pick on my friend Jen here. Any thoughts as you have been a part of the EDI Council, the One Utah Council, and this work that I just shared?
Thanks, Lais. I mean, one of the cool opportunities that's come down the pike from the One Utah Council is training, and even an opportunity to work with some of the architects of this framework who are willing to come in and work with our organization to customize and walk us through and help us adapt it for our needs. So that's one opportunity that I think I would invite our board to consider, if that's interesting, and our leadership to consider if that's something that we want to follow up on. Because one of the things I do love about the leadership that's emerged through Nubia's work, Lais, and other partners on the One Utah Council is while we're looking to leverage having a focus and having some common themes and the commitment, to things like making sure that we're people inspired, equity driven, and data informed. There's also a recognition there's no one size fits all. And so some customizing, some tailoring, and really looking at what do we need to do and getting that support. So that's one thing I would suggest we really look at.
Absolutely. And I will just add to that, that was the approach that we took with the 16 institutions that are a part of the Utah Board of Higher Ed. This wasn't mandate driven. It was, here's a guide that we're committed to using at a system level to review our practices and policies. And since then, several of the institutions have taken this framework and really adapted it to their specific institutional size, mission, scope. Salt Lake Community College, Dr. Juwan Kadri has led the Equity Compass. And it has principles of this framework, but it is very specific to their community college needs and the students that they're serving at Salt Lake Community College. Utah State University and Southern Utah University in a rural community, right? Very different needs, very different mission. And each of them have been implementing here at Weber State University. This framework helped to support their own institutional strategic plan. So I love Jen's comments around really taking it and adopting it for the various specific needs. David, I see your hand up.
Yeah, since I was mentioned, but also just because this is in my DNA, working on the 1, 2, 4 and more idea, I serve on a lot of committees with legislators and others. I apologize. I'll have to turn that off real quick. But anyways, what I've been encountering on multiple fronts, that's the issues surrounding this, is everything from our systems, whether it be our student information system, to how we pay for students in a K-12 system, to interfacing with the post-secondary college and tech school or university level folks. There's issues all through that become barriers. And I'm pleased to report that everywhere I go and everyone I talk to is working on eliminating those barriers, yet they still remain. And it's everything from if you don't fit a certain demographic, you can't get a scholarship, to even if you took the class in high school, it doesn't count because it wasn't able to be entered into the data system the right way, or it wasn't able to be recognized at the university or college level. Right of first refusal issues that prohibit a student from going to the class they need when they can fit it in their schedule. They're so challenged on their schedules anyways. And there's I know there's a whole plethora of issues on the other side of that as well for the institutions trying to support and provide those resources. So this is a big topic that you're talking about this morning, and it involves a lot of moving parts and a lot of people at a lot of levels, all getting the vision and doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think that really speaks to the assess piece, right? In identifying who are the players that need to be at the table to remove those structural barriers, because what I see across the board is that the commitment is there. I think folks generally believe in educational equity, believe in the need for strong, educated families that will support a strong Utah. And I think it's just about now looking at policies and practices, how we have always operated, and really questioning that and seeing what needs to be removed in order to make something happen. Thank you.
I'm going to raise my hand this way. I can't find the raise the hand on the bottom. Maybe I need some equity in the technical training here. But Lace, I really appreciated your presentation. And I'm on the healthcare sector. I attended the One Utah Summit last year at SUU, and I think what you're doing here for higher education is phenomenal. In the health equity side, we've been kind of focusing a lot lately on behavioral health pieces, but one of the things that they've talked about statewide, and I don't know, where the progress might be on that, but for nursing, you have a CNA, and then you have an LPN, and then you have an RN, and then you have a BSN, and you have all these steps. But in behavioral health, it starts at the master's level. There's nothing lower than the master's level as far as, going into counseling and helping people with some of their issues that they might be dealing with. And particularly as we've had a lot of suicidal ideation lately, that's been a concern. So I use that as a framework to ask my question, and I apologize, but are you familiar in your work? Are there people who are doing similar efforts on the healthcare side to bring that same sort of equity on the healthcare side, kind of at your level doing that?
Yeah, this is where I'm going to lean on Spencer a little bit. There were efforts led by charged by his office when he was at the Utah System of Higher Education around JED and the partnership there, and really making sure that each of the institutions have that as a resource and that it's to scale Spencer, do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, thanks, Lais. I hadn't heard that for a long time, and it makes me miss our interactions we once had. But the JED Foundation is a national organization that works to try and support. Primarily, they were in the post-secondary, but they've moved it a lot into the secondary space, but to support systems and institutions in their efforts around mental health, especially around peer-based support. They've since, I believe, established a partnership with Huntsman Mental Health Institute at the University of Utah. And as their mission has shifted the last few years to they still provide clinical services, but they've moved a lot into advocacy and support. The JED is a partnership that came to Utah through actually all things the Marriott Foundation, and they funded a 4-year relationship. And I think I'm not sure where that's at nowadays, Lais, but the neat part of that, I think, was a real focus on trying to use existing systems to build out a more robust support for mental health awareness and advocacy, and to sort of normalize the conversation, to remove stigma. And that's a big focus that Huntsman Mental Health has moved into, is that whole conversation around removing stigma. And it's interesting. I don't have anything quantifiable, but I kind of think the last couple of years, at least among young people, that conversation around mental health has normalized a little bit to some extent.
Well, I know that we have a lot more conversation around it, but when we start talking about higher education and helping people into careers, the problem, I guess, that I see with moving through the behavioral health tier is that you can't. My daughter has a degree in psychology, a 4-year degree in psychology, and she worked with Healthy Steps down in Arizona, which is children 0 to 6 years, but she could never be like a counselor or a program director because she didn't have that master's level. And so, you're working at a lower level, but you're not really able to help the people in the counseling side because there's no recognized certificate or ability to counsel at the bachelor's level. So as we think about that from a higher education perspective, I guess the ask that I would have from all of you who are involved in this is, on the healthcare side, help us to implement or find a way to have a lower level certificate for mental health than the master's level. We have it for everything else. We just don't have it on the behavioral health side.
Kurt, just real quickly, specifically to that, Weber State and the University of Utah were piloting a certificate. I think it was a behavioral health specialist was maybe the title. I don't know where that's at. It's been about a year, but I think they were piloting it to try and address that very gap that you're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know, Jared, maybe you might be aware of where that's at.
I probably have to get my memory refreshed on the Weber State pilot, but maybe Lais, she's at Weber State now. But I can say that I participate in the Health Workforce Advisory Council, and there's been a conversation there and with the Talent Ready Utah and some others, Doppel, about identifying a kind of an extender position that would be a certificate level healthcare. Mental health, behavioral health technician. There's also some conversation about how can licensure be modified, and some of this would have to be statutory and at the policy level. But what are some things that can be done to make those bachelor's level positions more accessible to the workforce? And we had a great conversation about that yesterday. There's a lot of mixed feelings about it. And I think it's incredibly important to hear from employers when they talk about that.
Yeah, thank you. It sounds like there's been some work. My first discussion with that was with Ashley Moretz in the Department of Health and Human Services, about it this year, but didn't know if from the higher education side whether that was being pushed through or not. But anyway, thank you.
So I'm going to jump in. I want to make sure that we get to Steve, who has had his hand, and then Unfortunately, as good as this discussion has been, and it's been an excellent discussion, I am going to need to move us along. But Steve, please, thank you for being patient.
I just want to go the public confidence in higher ed that it's plunged. I have this paragraph here. In the past 5 years, the share of people who express confidence in colleges and universities has dropped from half to just over a third in Gallup most recent survey. The tech sector that we work with is finding that the relevancy of a higher education degree is not what it used to be, and they're in hiring practices are not as concerned as to whether a student has it. I think they always favor a student that has that, but I'm just wondering if there's things being done to shore up the public perception that colleges and university educations are still as important as they used to be.
Thank you for that. Yes, there has been, there was a campaign through the Utah Board of Higher Education. College is Now was the title of the campaign. And the focus was that to really make sure that folks understand the value of higher education, the return on investment, and also, you know, practical ways of how to get a degree. So I think that is phasing out, but it is definitely something that I keep hearing at the board level, this focus on really communicating the value of higher education.
Because if you tie that in, and also the birth rate that dropped off, of course, and will start to impact colleges. From what I read, there are going to be 30 to 40% of the colleges and universities will close because of our lack of students, not only for the birth rate, but for the relevancy of higher ed. So I think it's something that's a bit of a crisis that higher ed's going to have to face in some way.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very, very much. I did not take the time before her presentation to read about her background in introducing her, but Ms. Martinez has an exceptional background. On behalf of the UETN board, thank you for your contributions to education in the state of Utah, for your advocacy. Thank you for the presentation this morning and a very, very engaging discussion.
Thank you so much. It was an honor to be with you all today.
Thank you. You have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Lais. Good to see you.
Okay, we are going to move on to our action agenda for members of the board. The first item that we have is to approve the minutes from our September 8th meeting. Hope that you've had a chance to review those, and I would entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Thank you, Steve. Is there a second?
I'll say.
Thank you, Tad. All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Seeing that there are none opposed, those minutes stand approved. Our next action item, this is a follow-up, and we appreciate Al Wood Downing joining us, our consultant who has been with us now a number of times. He joined us at our retreat. Board members now have access to an executive briefing of his final report as well as the full report. I hope that you've taken the opportunity to review that. This is an action item, but I'm going to treat it like a bit of a discussion item too, and I hope that's okay. So please indulge me in perhaps, you know, journeying away from Robert's rules of order, but we're going to go with this, Robert, and just kind of do it that way. So we're going to start with a discussion, and then that will lead to what I believe will be action. So I would actually like to invite Al Wood, if he would, and you have in your notes also, and I would refer you to the executive briefing. I would like to ask Al Wood if he would be willing to go through the key findings and recommendations. What we are looking for as board leadership from the board this morning is for your support, expressed support, to move forward with these recommendations. Now, some of these most likely will need to be reviewed by legal counsel to make sure that they are fitting changes to our bylaws, that everything works and is coordinated. But we would be looking for your support to begin implementing. Some of these will come back to the board as official action items, like bylaw changes, any changes, of course, in leadership, those sorts of things. So this is just really a show of support from the board to say, yes, let's get going with these things. So I want to make sure that Patty has a chance to speak to these things as well. So Elwood, if you wouldn't mind going through the key findings and recommendations, and then Patty, if you would, I would love your input before we open up to a discussion with the board.
Okay, sounds good. So good morning, everyone. And first of all, I want to thank everyone for your active participation, not only in the retreat, but also in the survey and talking with me, and also giving me the opportunity to sit in and observe a good bit in the advisory councils and the technology advisory committee as well. So all of your input and discussions were very helpful. I hope that you found the retreat to help with not only the discussion, but also the results of the final recommendations as well. It's that discussion that really, in getting to know you folks a lot more and how things operate also, and what's good for the outcome of the group as a whole. And I think that retreat, when we went into discussing those 3 recommendations in particular, you go in with one thought as how this can work, but when we work together, we really were able to edit things and get things to a point to where we think that will really work well to embrace the engagement between the board and the advisory councils, as well as your committees. And so what I prepared was an executive summary for you, but also a detailed report with that, which is only about 10 pages, 9 pages of reading. And then the appendices are all the things with recommendations and edits and that for the bylaws. One of the first items of recommendation was to set terms for the chair and the vice chair. Out of the discussion from the retreat is that there was an agreement with that, but there also was an agreement where they would prefer not to have it term limited, where those individuals that were running for the chair or the vice chair position, that when their term was up in 2 years, that if they wanted to be reelected, they could. And so we made sure that edit was done here. So essentially, the chair and the vice chair terms from the discussion was to have it be a 2-year term with a vice chair, where you would elect a vice chair, and that individual would serve as vice chair and then move to chair the second year. And the chair could choose to run again if he wanted, or what it does is it really opens up for the full board to really kind of take a pause and say, is there anyone else that would like to serve in this role as well? So I've made various edits redlined in your full report to the bylaws of that, as well as making some additional changes there, as well as I'll go through that. But my recommendation is that once you have legal counsel review the bylaws changes that I'm recommending. And once the board approves that at that very next meeting or at that current meeting, you elect a vice chair and let the current chair continue in that role until the last meeting of the fiscal year, and then of the end of the 2 years, and then re-elect a vice chair, because that vice chair would move into the chair role. And so that's what the recommendation is there. Now, what you'll find is in the guidelines for the advisory council, my recommendation is not to implement the exact same terms with them, but have terms, but let them decide whether they remain as chair or as vice chair, and not move in the same way as the governing board as well. So that was the one. The other is that to have committees that actively get the board involved in not only the organization, but also with the engagement between your advisory councils and your committees. And so my recommendation is that you have a finance and audit committee, which you saw from the retreat. There was pretty much unanimous support in regards to that. And then I had mentioned more of a governance committee and how that would be structured, if you will. From discussion, it was suggested that we call that committee a nominations and policies committee. And then I also added a performance and compensation committee. All of these committees are important for a governing board to operate. And with that said, I made those edits and called those out specifically in your bylaws, which I think are important for you to, as part of your structure, with that piece of it. The other piece that's not in here that was also brought up was in the bylaws. You'll notice that there's an added in the proxy sections from talking with some folks that they would like the opportunity to give their proxy to another individual within their organization that may be more knowledgeable about the decision that's going to be made, and that they would like them to vote in their position instead of giving it to another board member. However, the edit that I made would allow either or. So a board member could give their proxy to another individual within their organization or to another board member. So I wanted to kind of point that out. Those are some of the key material changes that I made in there in your bylaws. And since you're a governing board and not a separate organization, a 501c3 or incorporated in that, the bylaws, the way in which they're structured are pretty good. I just made some additional changes to that as well. And then the Technology Advisory Committee, which is the third one. This was another really good discussion at the retreat, I thought, and it helped structure the pillars that you're seeing in regards to that. And the collectively, and then post the retreat and the results, I did get to meet with all the advisory councils and give them the feedback from the survey and the retreat as well. And here it is recommended that the advisory committee, the Technology Advisory Committee, remain as a committee and not be structured as an advisory council within the statute on that aspect of it. And there's more detail of that in the report as well. And then the next is a board manual, which you'll see in the full report. I've outlined the pieces of that of what should be included in there, as well as an orientation. And those orientations should happen across the board with new board members as well as new advisory committee members as well. And I've included some sample onboarding letters that should be signed by the executive director and the chairs as well on that aspect of it. And then the next was in regards to the feedback loop. This was something that came up not only in the survey, but also within the discussion of really kind of trying to understand the feedback that they give to the board, and then the feedback, how does that get back to the advisory councils and vice versa. So I kind of structured that a little bit in the agendas format that you're seeing, item number 6, and helping to facilitate that discussion so that it's meaningful and purposeful in regards to make sure that you folks as a governing board and them as a advisory council are thinking about their role in how they help the success of UETN. And also you'll see on those agendas for bringing in more of the technology discussion into the advisory councils as well, so that that feedback loop gets back into the technology advisory committee, which we believe is important. And then the last was the bylaws and guidelines, which I've made some suggestions and edits to those as well. So those are my top 7 recommendations for you in regards to help strengthen the engagement and involvement between the governing board and your advisory councils. And from the feedback and that I received, it is not only from the board, but from the advisory councils, they do want to be more involved. They just don't know how or what needs to be done. And so I hope that this report and my work has helped facilitate that conversation and discussion, and help facilitate engagement and opportunities to continue for UETN to thrive as you folks are right now. You know, it's a great organization, and it's been my pleasure to work with all of you. So I thank you for that. And so I'll stop there, Robert, and take questions or discussion. And Patty, I don't know if you have.
I'd love to give Patty a chance. This started with an effort that Vice Chair Norman led, and very, very much appreciate her focus and effort here. So I'd love to be able to give her a chance to discuss, and then we'll open it up to discussion.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And anyone that knows me knows I love organization. I love to be able to follow something and point back to something, and making sure that we're all on the same page, and really having that active engagement by everyone that's here. It reminds me, we had a teacher of the year a long time ago, and the teacher of the year felt that they got a teacher of the year crown, and then they didn't do anything, and they had so much to give and so much to offer. And so we changed that teacher of the year program so that they're really a teacher leader, and they're able to advocate, and they're able to discuss and prep them in leadership roles and whatnot. And I think the same is here true, is in coming to the board, there is a position of leadership that you bring in, representing organizations and being able to have those clear discussions. And what does that look like? And what does it look like on the agenda? And really steering clear of micromanaging. That is not what we want to do, because everyone on here has a full-time job and has put our trust in Spencer to know, that that's not the role of the board, but really in looking at these policies. I really appreciate the depth of everyone committing to this, going through the retreat, giving input, all of the interviews and whatnot. And Elwood, I really appreciate you then going through it with us and with that fine-tooth comb and allowing the input and changes along the way. And I appreciate you pointing them out to this group. One of the big changes in there, we did the terms for the chair and the vice chair, and also having that designee. Those were in addition to. My hope at this point in time is that we have a good discussion on this. If everything is exactly how you want it, then great, vote yes. But this is a time to model some of those elements in there. If there's an area in here that you feel strongly about, an area, a technology advisory committee, if you don't want to have the designee be able to be someone outside of the board, any of these, this is an open time for that conversation to happen, because although policies are nimble, they're also hard to get back on an agenda, and it's nice to have a policy play through for at least a year before we put it back on. I'm just saying that right now. I don't care when we bring it back, but it is nice to be able to have really good feedback at this point in time to be able to say, yes, that reflected what we said, and I agree with it, or I don't, or this slight modification, even hearing some of the words that we learned this morning and how it was worded, is that what we want in moving forward? Did we word it correctly? That we would have that stamp up on there, or that digital asset as a legacy that is on there, to be able to say, yeah, that was a beginning point, and we all agree with it. So those are the things that are on there. I also wanted to really point out that on the chair and vice chair terms, that before Robert could say, let's draw straws, I was like, I think that the chair should be the one that stays in, and that the vice chair. So just so you guys
to announce and say that Patty and I both tried to say, that's just our friend.
Yes.
And you across it.
I got there first. Yeah, I got there first. So I just wanted to let everyone know that was totally something that came from our discussion and agreed upon. So just so you know, that is there as well. So I just in turning it back over to you, Robert, just opening up that really good discussion, and maybe not just do you like it, but what is it in there that you felt mirrored or exemplified what your wishes were, that was drawn out, or did we miss anything?
Thank you, Patty. Open discussion now before, again, we move to an action here. Thoughts from members of the board, please. Let's go with Jason, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to ask maybe for some clarifying, because in my mind, I'm still seeing the importance of UETN with technology, and why we wouldn't perhaps make them on equal footing as a council that's represented, just because of the work that we're doing in the cybersecurity realm, and everything that way. Because in my mind, I see them as a pillar that supports the network services, apps, professional services, broadcasting, all of those things, with my understanding, just my understanding of how UETN works. And so if there could be some discussion on that to help me understand maybe why we're not having them be one of those pillars.
Sure, I thank you for that question. So that was a really good discussion we had during our retreat. And I do recall that was, at least at the time, the conclusion that the board moved towards in discussion. Elwood, I don't know if you could refresh or clarify how that discussion went, but if I recall, that was at the time, that was the wish of the board, was to not move in the direction of a council for that one group.
That is correct. I'm going to share my screen, and also I know Jim Stewart's also on the call, and maybe he as well could shed some light on this in regards to the discussion that we had with the Technology Advisory Committee as well. When I reported out to them, I thought perhaps maybe we would end up having a little bit more of a discussion about it in regards from their framework as well. And they do also see themselves more as a community of practice where they come together to address certain technology needs and things. And the way in which the structure is the Technology Advisory Committee is also part of the foundation that feeds into these two areas of what UETN does. I know everyone thinks of the network and the technology as the core, but none of that can happen without the other pillars in education, telehealth, and so forth. So from that aspect of seeing it more as a community of practice and being able to be a little bit more agile and somewhat nimble in regards to the way that they work, they and their guidelines that they have in regards to the committee seems to be working really well, and having it small in that regards. We feel that and even from my recommendation, I think that is part of the infrastructure, part of the support of it, but it's not directly in regards to governance of UETN, of moving them forward. It plays a key role, and it needs to be part of that ecosystem, but does it need to be defined as a specific advisory council in the statute? And I don't believe it does to be effective. And I know Spencer may have some additional comments about this as well, because we've had quite a bit of discussion about this. So I want the group that is responsible for this to kind of carry forward, because as Patty said, this is an opportunity to have that discussion and decide whether or not, maybe yes, that's what my recommendation is, but that's not what we want to do. And I respect that.
So we have some hands from both Patty as well as Jared. So let's go to Patty and then Jared and Jason. We'll come back to you to make sure that your question is being addressed.
Yeah, I appreciate that background. I'd also like to hear from Jim as well, and to hear from Chandra, because when we're looking at these pillars, I'm just thinking of library, and I'm looking at it across the street. Do you see the work that you're doing in these pillars within the groups, and where it would fit along the way as well? So maybe hearing from Jim, and then maybe hearing from Chandra as well, because you brought up the point, if do we see everyone? Do we all see our work and bringing it to UETN within the pillars that are identified? So first to Jim, and then Chandra maybe answering that question.
Thanks, Patty. Happy to jump in here. I'll ask Spencer to follow up on comments that I make, but we've had a thorough discussion within the technical advisory or technology advisory committee, and we're thinking that we can be very effective, and that there's less formality and more ability to have wide open discussions with just being the committee, and then bringing back to the board any kind of insights or things that we have, and that as you want us to address specific ideas and things that we can do that. If you look at the bylaws and how the board allowed us to set up this committee, we have the ability to have ad hoc groups. We can add to it, we can expand it and augment it wherever we need to go with that. We just realized that we couldn't put every discipline and every somebody that was an expert in every area on this committee, but we could have a small, nimble group. And we think that with technology the way it is, that the more nimble we can be, the smaller we can be, and then allow us to expand into areas where we need to address things for the board or for stakeholders or others. And so we just don't feel the need. It's not that we wouldn't welcome that, and if that's what the board would want us to do, we just feel like we can be effective from the position that we have right now.
Thank you, Jim, for helping to fill in the holes that I didn't very well. So thank you.
That's Jim, you had mentioned Spencer. Spencer, is there any follow-up that you want to give to that? I want to make sure that I get to both Jared and then David too, who has his hand.
I'll be brief, and thank you, Jim. Just to add to that, the group that meets that Jim has assembled, I mean, there's some great expertise there, both locally and nationally. And so it is a great opportunity for them to informally get together. I think one of the things also that's important to state is that that committee, what we hope to do operationally is to tie them more explicitly also to the advisory councils. And if you think of some of the topics they've covered around either wireless, esports, cybersecurity, we haven't had those discussions in some of the advisory councils as much as maybe we could. And Jason, to your question, I feel like that might be a way by which we elevate the work of that technology advisory committee, is to have them have a more explicit connection to not only to the board itself, but to those councils.
Thank you, Spencer. Let's go to, and I would just throw in there and add, it's my hope that we will end up through this process, we will end up with descriptive charters for each one of these councils and committees that clearly outlines what they do, what they're charged with, that of course aligns with the bylaws, but also talks about the differences in names, why council versus committee, and charters, in descriptive charters can do that. And that's something that of course would come back to the board for review and approval. Let's go to Jared and then David.
So my thought is that I don't know that it matters whether we call it a council or a committee or whatever it is that we're having it be there at the bottom. I think for me the main thing is it's not necessary to go to statute to make something, whatever you want to call it. And Robert, to your last comment there, yeah, what do we call these? Well, the councils are in statute, but that doesn't mean we can't have more councils. Why don't we make them all councils? What's the difference? Other than that, the committees seem to be having more board oversight involvement than do the councils. The councils are kind of input bodies, and I don't know. In my view, the Technology Advisory Committee seems like it might be the same as one of those councils.
I think that one of the differences, just so we know that we've been treating with the Technology Advisory Committee, and this gets to what Jim was explaining, by being a committee and not a council, you all know, because we do it almost every time we meet, for our councils, membership on the councils needs board approval. Membership on the Technology Advisory Committee has not needed board approval. That committee has been able to flex with its membership based on topics, based on needs. That's one of the things that I've appreciated about the less formal committee description of that group is that can pivot and move and change, expand, contract, really based on the topics and things that they are looking at. Less formal than the council, again, that needs approval from the board for each of its members. So I'll throw that in as what has historically been a difference between committee and council. Let's go to David.
Robert, I just want to say here to that. I have seen this committee, the Technology Advisory Committee, at work for years. And looking at this framework, I just want to make sure I'm getting the right impression of what I'm looking at and what I'm reading on this, on the bylaws in this document. On how to operate at UETN. But in my view of this, while technology is not the overarching ruler of everything at UETN, it's certainly the foundation of everything that happens at UETN. And that's what it looks like in the model that I'm looking at here as well. I think technology's positioned itself to operate in a way to serve all areas at need as things arise. And I think if you go through some kind of formal process of board appointed members to their advisory committees, we'd actually hamstring their work, not support their work. We expect them to come up with answers immediately to something that we just think, oh, that's interesting, AI. So what do we do with that? And I think we need to leave them free to explore connectivity issues and AI and cybersecurity issues at will with whatever team of experts they can connect, and their networking globally has proven very valuable to the state.
Thank you. I want to be able to, and Elwood, if you could stop sharing your screen, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm wondering
Appreciate
if before that we can have Chandra speak to that
Yes,
that graph.
Thank you. I was
as
kind
well.
of trying to follow.
Yeah.
and
Oh, okay.
I lost that stream. So yes, please.
Thank you, Patty, for calling out libraries. And I think when I look at those pillars, I absolutely see the libraries represented. Because the depth and the breadth of the different types of libraries, it's almost like the libraries are kind of the constituency of libraries spread across so many different areas that I absolutely see libraries represented, and then the communities they in turn represent, whether it's a school, academic library, or a public library, a special library, tribal library, all of that fits in. Again, we all talk about the technology piece for UETN that's so vital, which for libraries, I mean, we work with UETN. There's several libraries that wouldn't have internet if it wasn't for UETN. And then that component, you know, for school libraries, Patty, you can speak to this, that how important it is. So I think libraries reach a whole bunch of different areas. Even the telehealth libraries are starting to get into doing a lot of telehealth. So I definitely think libraries are represented.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to circle back, Jason, to you. You sparked an excellent discussion. So thank you for that. Did that address your question?
Yeah, I appreciate the feedback and the discussion. One thing that I just want to, the reason I asked the question is because when we go to the legislature with technology asks, say like for cybersecurity, for different things, I want to make sure that we're having good, robust discussion so that K-12 and higher ed are working hand in hand to support one another and not make one, and I'll throw out the libraries, the telehealth. We want to move hand in hand so that we're not making one group feel like they need to go a separate route to ask legislators to fund initiatives. And that's why I'm bringing up and asking the question about how important I think the technology group is to the structure of UETN.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. And again, it's been an excellent discussion. And I think the fact that it's part of the foundation on that illustration really goes to your point, Jason, that it's foundational to what we do with all of the various groups that UETN represents. So other discussion points of clarification or questions from members of the board? Oh, please, Elwood.
Yeah, just, you know, the other thing that may help you folks in this regards, if you want, in the bylaws on 13.4, I did not specifically call out the Technology Advisory Committee. It is considered as well as any other standing committee the board deemed necessary if the group, the governing board, believes that this is something that should always exist. It could be called out into in the bylaws so that is just part of the standard committees that you folks have, or it can be the way it is right now in your bylaws. It just states that any other standing committees the board deem necessary. So if
I think that
it could be defined.
I think that considering the discussion we've had this morning about it and the fact that it, you know, I think there's broad agreement based on what we've heard that the technology committee is foundational
Right.
to what UETN does and to what the board does. I would be supportive of it being codified within the bylaws.
I can make that red lined edit suggestions as well when I submit all my final paperwork to Laura and Spencer.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Kurt.
So, first of all, I would thank you. This has been a great document, and I agree that the diagram, the picture there with the technology advisory being on the foundation is a great place for it to be, because it does span every aspect of the organization. And so I appreciate that. I don't want to, I don't know if we're done with that conversation or not, but I was reading on the governance section, and in 6.2 in the bylaws, and I think I know what the intent is. The intent is for the chair to serve for 2 years and the vice chair to serve 2 years in rotating terms. The section 6.2 of the bylaws says that the vice chair term shall be 2 years, but it doesn't address the chair position at all. I mean, if you know what we're talking about, then you can read it into there, but it doesn't say that. So I think if we're going to do some more red line changes to the bylaws, we ought to say that the term of the chair is for 2 years, which is offset by the chair of the vice, or the term of the vice chair, which is also 2 years, because in the bylaws it indicates that the vice chair's first year is vice chair, the vice chair's second year is actually as a chair. So technically, it's a planned succession from vice chair to chair. So it's just not real clear the way it's written in 6.2. But I think that if the chair serves for, the chair never actually serves for 2 years. I mean, we're really electing a vice chair, and the vice chair serves for 2 years. 1 year as vice chair, 1 year as chair.
Correct.
And I don't know that it clearly articulates that, but.
And Kurt, you brought up, I think, out of all of the things, the language of the terms, Elwood knows is something. Patty, Elwood, Spencer, Lauren, that's something that we've been working on probably the most. And I appreciate you pointing it out. It's good to have fresh eyes to look at this and say, is that saying what we think it's saying? So thank you for bringing that up and really identifying the nuances of really what we're saying, because this is a pretty dramatic change in how we're doing leadership, and would love to get feedback from the board of that idea, the way that Kurt described it. So really, in a way, you could have terms that extend, but really what's happening is if the chair ever wants to serve as the chair again, the chair is going to have to go through the vice chair in order to move to.
That's correct.
To be a chair.
Yes, I appreciated the language that was in there about a board member in their 3rd or 4th year of the terms ineligible to run, because they don't have 2 years left.
Yeah,
right.
So so you pretty much got to if you're a board member in your 2nd term, right? And so now you're a very seasoned board member. So if you're a board member in your 2nd term, you could very easily do this in your 1st year of your 2nd term. So to speak.
Now, personally, what I'm hoping will not happen, board members, and I'm putting you on notice, is that we will simply just not keep recycling the same too, that there's opportunities across the board membership. And that's really the intention here. All of this is done in the spirit of board engagement, board member engagement, and a way for members of the board to be more involved with the board and participate more. So we're hopeful that will spur that type of engagement. Let's go, Steve, please.
Yeah, just one comment. I just want to make sure in the last where it says it is advised to have in-house counsel. I don't think it advised. I think we want in-house counsel to look at this, right?
Thank you. That
Yes,
is
we
the
do.
expectation. That's a great, thank you for
Yes.
pointing that word out. That is, it will be expected. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so again, for members of the board, the action this morning is just, do you kind of give this your support to move forward, knowing that these various changes will be coming back to the board as action items for official approval. So let's go to Jason, please.
I would make a motion to give approval for it to move, for the document to move forward.
Okay, there is a motion on the floor for the document to move forward. I'm assuming Jason, the document including the recommendations. Point of clarification. So that is the motion. Is there a
I'll
second?
second.
Thank you, Christina. Any discussion?
What is it?
On
What is it?
the dates of the document, it says 2024. So I'm assuming that when we move this forward, we're going to move it forward with the corrections, and we're not actually approving these bylaws until 2024.
Correct.
Okay.
Now,
Yes.
the definition to move forward is not clear to me. Is move forward to where?
Move forward with a review by legal counsel, actual drafting the language of the bylaw changes, preparing really what moving forward is, Steve, preparing all of these changes to come back to the board as official action items, item by item.
Now, it's clarification. I agree.
That's how I interpreted what I was saying, is just off of the description that Elwood had written in the document to move that forward that way.
Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Hearing no other discussion, we will take a vote. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. And any opposed? Thank you very much. This is really, I don't want to overstate, but this is a new day for this board, and really excited about these changes. And thank you, Elwood, again for your excellent contributions and how you've been a part of this and led this process. We appreciate your great work.
You're welcome, and thank you again for the opportunity to work with all of you.
Okay, Spencer, we are moving this on now. The staff will take this on, and 2024 we'll see these changes coming back to the board for approval. Moving on to our next action item, it's the 2024 meeting dates, and just one note, depending on when you downloaded the materials, there is a change. The Educational Council February meeting has now been moved to February 1st because of some conflicts on February 2nd. So you can see that we have the advisory councils, the technology committee, and the first two UETN board meetings for 2024 are listed in your materials. I would entertain a motion to approve these dates.
Move approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Kurt. Any discussion? Or Spencer?
Chair Wagner, just real quickly, you'll note these dates are only through April. When we come back in February, we'll provide dates through the end of the year. We wanted to hold off just because of these other changes that are going on related to committees. We want to make sure we account for any scheduling adjustments we need to make as we begin that implementation.
It's a great point. Thank you, Spencer. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. And any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you very much. We now will move to some new council members, specifically telehealth, and I believe Executive Director Spencer Jenkins is going to present these names to the board.
Yes, you'll note in your materials there's a little bit of a bio on the two proposed members, and Kelly Smith resides in Blanding down at Blue Mountain Health, and then Donovan is a pharmacist in Wayne County. I believe Kelly has already attended a council meeting, and Donovan is a new addition. We're excited by these because they both bring in a rural perspective, which is important for that council. But with that, I'll certainly try to entertain any questions or turn it back to you, Chair Wagner.
Great. We can go ahead. I would entertain a motion on these two individuals. Thank you, Tad. Is there a second?
So moved.
Thank you, Kurt. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please raise your hand. And any opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes. Thank you. We are excited about these two new members of the council and their contributions. That completes our action items as a board. We'll now move into the discussion phase. And first up is a discussion on ARPA-funded projects. And I believe that Kelly Cole will be leading this discussion. Kelly, please.
Thank you, Chair. I am really excited to be able to talk about this project. I'm going to start by saying that we originally applied for these ARPA, and ARPA stands for the American Rescue Plan Act. About $10 billion nationwide was allocated to the Department of Treasury and then sent out to the states. The state of Utah got about 137 million was our allocation for the state. And we presented a plan to the legislature and the governor's office back in 2021. And then in September of this year, we finally were notified that we will be getting about $19 million of funding. And so I would just like to kind of give the board an overview of what we are intending with those ARPA funds. And the program specifically is called the Capital Projects Fund. And it's administered, as I said, through the Department of Treasury. And our application to the Department of Treasury, we focused on a couple of different things in our application. As you all know, as you've been involved with UETN for many years, most of you, our network has become larger, more complex, and this opportunity is actually going to give us an opportunity to do some network upgrades that have been needed. So that is one portion of this project is that we'll be doing some needed network upgrades. And what that would look like is a combination of several things. And so we are planning on scaling bandwidth between Utah Valley University and Utah Tech University. So essentially kind of the Orem to St. George area, doing some 400 gig upgrades. And so we're kind of working on upgrading the backbone, and then that will have sort of a ripple effect out into the rest of the network. And it's been really great to meet with our project team. And they have been very, I'm really impressed with the thought that they've given this in being able to talk about expanding this and then even redeploying existing equipment into other parts of the network. And I think that they're really working through an intricate way to just improve our network capacity. Another thing that we are working on as far as like the larger network is this opportunity gives us some funding towards cybersecurity. And so Jim's team, Troy specifically, has been working on some tools, hardware, software, et cetera, that can be purchased through these funds. And then some of the funner parts that we get to see a little bit more on the ground. This opportunity will also allow us to do some upgrades to public Wi-Fi. And Chandra, I know that you have been out for a little bit, but we have been talking internally, and we will be meeting more specifically with the state library but we do have some funding that we can allocate towards improving Wi-Fi access at the public libraries. And that actually was a really important part of this plan, and getting Treasury to be very supportive of this application. And so we will be working with the state library stakeholders to determine what that will look like. But I do anticipate that you'll be seeing some really great upgrades with public Wi-Fi. And then we also will be using some of the funding for new circuits to some public libraries. On the handout, we have them listed. So in Emory County, Box Elder County, the Granite Library Branch, Clearfield Library. And so those are ones that are coming on board to our network. So some of the funds will be used towards those new builds, along with, as you know, we always get asked, well, what's next to build out to? And just to make everybody aware, we're still building schools. And so there'll be new schools coming onto the network. And so we'll be using some of this funding for those new schools. And we project probably about 30 to 40 over the course of this project, kind of over a 3-year period. We'll probably have, 10 to 15 a year. And so we've kind of estimated how many schools will be adding in to the network. And so it has multi-facets, and we're really excited. It's been a long process, but we're really excited that we got an approval, and we're excited to work with our team internally and with our stakeholders. Lisa, do you have anything that you wanted to add?
I would say that we actually are reporting to the governor's office though first. So we don't report to the U.S. Treasury. We report to the governor's office, and we're hand in hand with the governor's office. We will also use it for replacement of existing older equipment too throughout the network. So it's more than that. It's throughout the whole network. And I think Kelly mentioned it, but it's a 3-year project. So we're breaking it up by fiscal year. And by doing that, we should be able to, at least this year we have, and going forward, we may be able to not have any equipment request going forward with the legislature for a few years. That's it.
Any questions?
Great. Thank you, Kelly. And thank you, Lisa. Any questions?
Robert, if I can just add one comment, that you'll recall as a board during COVID, UETN received that CARES funding, $100+ million, and came at the same time others were receiving a significant infusion of one-time funds. This ARPA infusion helps soften that cliff, if you will, that I know a lot of you are very aware of. And Lisa's team and Jim's team and Kelly have been incredible in sort of planning for the long view as much as you can with one-time dollars. I mean, in prepaying licenses and things like that. And it's neat because I feel like we are seeing a softer landing from a huge infusion of funding, which has been incredibly helpful. But there's, as you can see, there's growing need. As Jim continually reminds me, the internet is not going away. It's going the opposite direction. Our traffic continues to grow year over year, 20+%, and there's that continuing need. But there's a softened landing, if you will, we're seeing now because of this opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Steve.
So Spencer, there's a soft landing here from the CARES Act money, but plans are underway to make sure you have a soft landing once this money's gone, right? The one-time money is a real challenge, and I know you work through this really well, but once that money's gone and you have contracts that you then or equipment you need to replace, there's a clear understanding to go with the legislature and other funding that will be able to follow up with that and make sure that continues to happen when we lose that money.
Yes, we have a bit of buffer for a year or two, but we're going to be moving right back into equipment needs for sure. Right, Jim?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, this is wonderful. I mean, to get this money is the good work of Spencer and Lisa and all others. It's really needed. And like I say, except for the one-time nature of it, it's really a wonderful thing. So good work.
Agreed. Thank you. Okay, we will move on to our executive director's report. Spencer.
Thank you. I hope you don't mind if I share my screen. I think it'll be more interesting than watching me talk anyway. Just a real quick update before I jump too far into things on the legislative side. As you know, you adopted legislative priorities at our last meeting, primarily for cybersecurity and for software. We've started to have some conversations with the legislature. As you all know, one of the overriding themes is the questions around what kind of new money will be there. It's a much thinner year than we've had in the past few years. We have a meeting with our appropriations committee chairs on December 11th, and we'll be presenting these, and that's kind of one of the first major steps as we head into the session. But I have been out talking to legislators informally. There's a lot of interest in cybersecurity. That's a big policy question because it's such a big ask, but it's certainly not, I don't feel like we're going too far afield from a legislative standpoint pursuing this. So we'll keep you updated. A couple other things just to touch on. You might remember in our last meeting, we talked about a lot of the work we're doing with with GOYO, the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, related to the Broadband Equity and Deployment Program. That's the BEAD grant program. I just wanted to report back on this speed test effort we made in partnership with many districts. Several thousand tests were made, and what it highlighted to us was that there are some gaps that still exist out there, despite how connected Utah is. The fact that we saw 2/3 of these tests come in less than 100 megabits. Typical household speed is about 130. Places along the Wasatch Front are even faster than that. But the fact that there's still 2/3 of people reporting that lack of connectivity. Anyone who deals with students, you know how much the internet is important to them on and off the school campuses. And we just wanted to report that. We're still working with GOYO in what the implications are in relation to the grant funding that's coming, starting this January, actually, to providers. But we hope this kind of effort will have some influence in how they allocate those funds to help these gaps. Similarly, we're in the thick of, or hopefully on the tail end of this, Jim, with his team, the tech inventory. This is the third iteration, I believe, of this. It's a survey collection effort from the tech directors in K-12 to understand the use of technology and devices. We're getting close to the full response. We'll present those findings later in 2024. Jim, do you have anything you want to share there?
We're going to get 100%. We had a conversation with Corey and Jeff this morning, and we've been talking to Connected Nation. So we're supposed to close the portal tomorrow, but we'll stay until next week. And Connected Nation assures us that there's not going to be a problem, and we'll get 100% response again.
We're close. And just to add there, thanks, Jim. And just to add, we're also doing this with the libraries, and we hope that that will give us some assessment to work with Chandra and her many stakeholders on where UETN can help be a support to their efforts related to technology use. Just a quick note, just to note the passing of one of our tech specialists in October. Tom Baldwin had been with UETN for since 2011. He passed away. It directly impacted many on our team in our network area. Was a good gentleman. We're still working through filling the gap that he left in terms of function and work, but it was a hard news to take with his wonderful family. We just wanted to note and honor his passing. We'll miss him. We also, many of you are aware of SaintCon as a very big conference that UETN is a big supporter behind. This year was its biggest. One of the neat components this year is they added an education track focused on education specifically. It was very well attended, incredibly popular. Steve, the CIOs on the higher ed side mentioned this is a very important conference for many of their staff. We hope to continue it, and just wanted to note that to the board that it's become an incredible community resource for those in the cyber area. It's an interesting, for those of us that are not as well trained in cyber and the culture associated with it, it's an interesting experience culturally speaking, but it's a lot of fun. Wanted to highlight one of our staff, Nikki Parisho. She's part of the telehealth team. You may recall the NRTRC. This is a federal grant that UETN holds, in which we provide technical support across 7 states. This is a federal grant from the Department of Health and Human Services. Nikki's actually based out of Montana, and our telehealth team has achieved a pretty good visibility nationally with this technical support. There are several regional groups. The NRTRC one is by far the most visible. Nikki was just a couple weeks ago, she had the opportunity to testify in front of the U.S. Senate Healthcare Subcommittee. I don't know there are many of us around that have those opportunities, but it was neat to hear her talk. She's an incredible expert and well-respected in this area, and just wanted to highlight her work there, and to our telehealth team in general, just because that technical support side is not as visible maybe in comparison to the network work we do for telehealth. Just a quick note along those lines. One of the things that was discussed at the board retreat that was not part of Elwood's recommendations, was outside of his scope, frankly, was the communications. And as you know, we made a few adjustments organizationally late summer to our communications team. And one of the big things that we are rolling out is a clarification in our brand architecture. Many of you are familiar with the UEN logo. It's been around for many years and has very broad recognition. For many years, UETN kind of moved in different areas and different directions in how to incorporate a look and feel that hopefully can hold. With some help from Jamie Gardner and Jen Gibbs in our communications group, this is how we want to architect some things. I've spoke to, I think, almost all of you about this adjustment. For you as a board and for our legislature, of course, we'll continue to refer to UETN as UETN. But for our stakeholders, it's been abundantly clear to us that there's a preference, whether it's telehealth or education. They better identify with the specificity of what being either telehealth or education, UTN, UEN. We certainly won't abandon the fact that this is UETN as an organization, and we're going to show them and present them together. But when it comes to some of the communications and outward branding interaction with our stakeholders, we're going to try and be much more definitive in the audiences we are communicating to. You'll see a lot more of that coming in the new year with our websites being tweaked and some other things. But we hope it provides more clarity in terms of the missions associated with these 2 primary customer groups we serve. In the spirit of rebranding, there are new videos that I think you'll note at the end of the agenda related to our holidays, keeping with that long-standing tradition. I will note, we have many on our UETN team who have incredible talents. We have skydivers. Jim's a bass player now. He's added to the many in our organization that play that instrument. We have people who are Baja drivers, Taekwondo experts. But I wanted to highlight Max Gonzalez. He's a project manager. He was selected among thousands of applicants to be a part of the White House decorating team. He was there last weekend, and I got this picture. I thought it'd be fun to share in the spirit of the season. But with that, that's my brief report. Be happy to take any questions or comments, or we can certainly move on.
Great, Spencer. Thank you very much. Questions, comments?
Yeah, on the logo, have you thought about with the old UEN, with the UEN logo, to put the state by that as well? I'd like the state with a little, the graphic helps explain it, and in the spirit of unity, but having the letters differently. Just a comment.
Yeah, we appreciate that, and Jen and Jamie have done a lot of work in conversation, and maybe it's a consideration we should make going forward, either for the UETN logo itself or for the 2 sub logos.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, or I really appreciate this work, and I think that in addition to the identity of the logo, Spencer and I talked a little bit about perhaps refreshing the mission and scope of UTN and ensuring that that our focus is where we should be and where the resources that we bring to bear are appropriate, and we're optimizing those. So not for today, but in the future, I think that might be something that I would suggest that we work with, either with the council, the telehealth council, and then bring recommendations back to the board. But something that I think in sort of this new day and new identity, it may be time to refresh and take a look at that.
And Ted, I apologize. I failed to note, I appreciate you commenting, Robert. If I may, I failed to note Matt McCullough's departure. As you know, Matt McCullough was with UETN for several years. He has taken an opportunity with the Utah Hospital Association as the Rural Hospital Improvement Director. He'll still be involved in rural health care and telehealth, which we look forward to. And he's done a lot of work the last several years in carrying the mission of telehealth. And to Tad's, I think, comment, this is an opportunity for us to maybe revisit the overall strategy and mission of telehealth in UETN. And as we go out, and we're currently recruiting Matt's replacement, that will be a part of that hire, is to work to reorient the strategy related to telehealth, not in a way to completely eliminate it or anything like that, but there are some very basic questions around the long-term strategy and future for telehealth as it pertains to UETN.
Okay, Spencer, thank you very much for that report. I loved the news and information, some very exciting and happy, and some very, of course, very sad too. So thank you for sharing. I'm going to beg the patience of members of the board. We are coming up on the hour, but we do need to complete our annual open meeting training with a approximately 8-minute video. So would ask board members, if you're able to, please hang in there, hang with us. And I believe someone on the UETN team has that queued up and ready to go, and we can watch that now.
Yeah, I'll put it up right now. Thank you, Robert. Can you all hear that?
Yes. No, we can't.
No, we are not hearing it.
Okay.
No.
Okay. I apologize. I'm going to put up the captions. I'm going to let it go so you can read what is being said till I fix the audio. How's that?
That's good.
Great, thanks. It's very quiet. We can hear it, but it's very, very quiet. Spencer, just wanted to make sure you're working on things from your end. The screen is frozen and we're not hearing anything.
held to
Sorry, I
discuss
didn't know it was paused. I
Yes.
apologize. Boy, this is not good.
It was paused.
It's
And
bad.
we could hear a little bit of the audio, but it was very faint.
Oh man, I feel bad. Okay, let's try this again. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay.
So what's considered an open and public?
There we go.
It's when a public body quorum, also known as a simple majority, meets to discuss or act upon government business. It includes the meetings sometimes referred to as workshops or executive sessions. Regular meetings, public hearings, electronic meetings, and emergency meetings are all open and public meetings. Open and public meetings don't include chance or social meetings. A public hearing is a type of open and public meeting where citizens have a reasonable opportunity to speak. Public hearings happen when a government adopts a budget, imposes or increases taxes or fees, or transfers money from an enterprise fund. These meetings have extra notice and posting requirements and won't be addressed in this video. An electronic meeting is a type of open and public meeting that's convened electronically, such as via phone or the internet. Remember, the governing body must adopt a resolution, rule, or ordinance allowing and governing electronic meetings. OPMA adds additional requirements too. An emergency meeting may be held to discuss an urgent matter due to unforeseen circumstances. In order to hold the meeting, the best notice that's feasible is provided of the time, location, and topics to be considered. An attempt is made to contact all governing body members, and the governing body majority approves the meeting. An open and public meeting may be closed to discuss any of the following: a person's character, competence, or health, collective bargaining, litigation, certain real property transactions, including any form of a water right or water shares with specific restrictions, security personnel, devices, or systems deployment, investigations of criminal misconduct, and private or protected information for the Utah Procurement Code, including trade secrets. A closed meeting may be held only if a quorum is present and the meeting was properly noticed. 2/3 of the governing body present at the meeting need to vote yes to close a meeting. Quick math lesson. 2 divided by 3 equals 66.7%. Let's say your governing body has 5 members present at the meeting. If 3 out of 5 members vote yes, that equals 60%, which is not equal or greater than 66.7%, which means you're 1 member short and would need 4 out of 5 members to vote yes. During a closed meeting, a governing body can't interview someone applying to fill an elected position, discuss filling a midterm vacancy or temporary absence, discuss the character, competence, or health of the person whose name was submitted for consideration to fill a midterm vacancy or temporary absence, approve any ordinance, resolution, rule, regulation, contract, or appointment, or take a vote, unless it's a vote on a motion to end the closed portion of the meeting and return to an open meeting. When a governing body closes a meeting, the following must be publicly announced and entered into the minutes of the open meeting in which the closed meeting was approved. The reason or reasons for holding the closed meeting, the location where the closed meeting will be held, and the vote of each member of the governing body either for or against the motion to close the meeting. If a closed meeting is discussing a person's character, competence, or health, or security personnel, devices, or systems deployment, or several other exceptions, mostly related to state bodies or project entities, no recording or minutes are required. However, the presiding member needs to sign a sworn written statement stating such. If the closed meeting is held for any other reason, a recording must be made, which includes date, time, and place of the meeting, names of members present and absent, and names of all others, except where disclosure would infringe on the confidentiality necessary to fulfill the original purpose of closing the meeting. Regular open and public meetings require 24 hours notice. The public notice includes the meeting, agenda, date, time, and place. Public meeting agendas need to include reasonably specified topics to be considered, with each topic listed under a separate agenda item on the meeting agenda. The governing body may not consider a topic of an open meeting that wasn't on the agenda. If a new topic not on the agenda is raised by the public during an open meeting, the governing body may discuss the topic. However, final action may not be taken on the topic during the open meeting. Additionally, entities holding regular meetings scheduled in advance over the course of the year need to provide annual notice of the entire year's meeting schedule. The notice must include the date, time, and place for each meeting.
Notice is posted on the public body's website in a public location such as the location where the meeting will be held, and on Utah's public notice website in accordance with Utah Code 63G-30-102.
Typically, posting on the public notice website is done by the records officer, recorder, or clerk. However, it's the governing body's responsibility to ensure notice is provided. State Archives has prepared a training manual with guide for owners and posters, as well as training videos that can be accessed at their website, archives.utah.gov. Written minutes and a recording are kept of all open meetings, with few exceptions. Written minutes include the date, time, and place of the meeting, the names of members present and absent, the substance of all matters, names of citizens providing comments, the substance of the comments provided, any information a body member requests be entered in minutes or recorded, and a record by individual member each vote taken. A body with elected members must record each vote in list format by category for each action taken by a member, yes votes, no votes, and absent votes next to each vote. The recording must be a complete and unedited record of all open portions of the meeting, beginning to end, and be labeled with the meeting date, time, and place. All or any part of an open meeting may be independently recorded by any person in attendance if the recording does not interfere with the conduct of the meeting. Pending minutes means written minutes of an open meeting drafted subject to change before being approved by the public body of the meeting. Pending minutes must contain a clear indication, such as a draft or pending watermark, that the governing body hasn't yet approved the minutes, and that the minutes are subject to change until the public body approves them. Approved minutes means written minutes of an open meeting approved by the public body and not the open meeting. Entities must establish and implement procedures for the public body's approval of minutes. Public meeting pending minutes, approved minutes, and recordings for public records on the ground. Any individual who publicly presents information relating to an item in the public body's meeting agenda must provide a copy of the information for inclusion in the record. Make pending minutes available to the public within 30 days. Within 3 business days after approving written minutes of an open meeting, make approved minutes and any public materials available at the Utah Public Notice website, the entity's primary office, and the entity's website. Within 3 business days after holding an open meeting, make an audio recording of the meeting available for the public to listen.
Thank you, Spencer. Appreciate that. And it's nice to be able to complete that task as a board. With that, just want to again draw your attention to the holiday videos. Hope that you enjoy those. Our next meeting will be February 9th. Just want to make note that that's after the start of the legislative session. Potentially, please watch your emails as we ask or invite members of the board to engage with the legislature and all of our efforts. So with that, I wish you all happy holidays, safe and well with family and friends. Thank you again for your great work and for your participation. Thank you for a wonderful year. Very, very much you are very, very much appreciated. And with that, I will entertain a motion to close the meeting.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ted. All in favor, please raise your hand and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you very much. See you.
Thank you,
Thank
Robert.
you.
Thanks so
Bye-bye.
much.
Thanks, everybody.